Welcome to the fourth episode of BAI Communications Smart Communities podcast, where we speak with business leaders and industry experts to ask them what the future holds for connectivity. In this episode, we are excited to be joined by Dan Winson, the founder and CEO of Zetifi. Interviewing him is Stephen Farrugia, Chief Technology Officer of BAI Communications Australia, talking about solving connectivity problems for people and business in regional areas and the exciting technologies for smarter farming that coverage will enable.
Hi, I'm Steve Farrugia, the CTO at BAI Communications Australia. Welcome to our Smart Communities podcast. It's my pleasure to welcome Dan Winson, the founder and CEO of Setify, a startup that is designing and manufacturing wireless network devices for rural and remote areas. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Steve.
Dan, can you tell us a bit about Setify and the role you play in connecting farms and rural communities?
Definitely, love to. So, we're a startup based in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. There's a team of 15 full-time staff here. We're building products for a very specific niche market, which is the rural and remote connectivity. So essentially farmers and other people that are in areas where the traditional telecommunication carriers can't economically reach them. We're building devices that fill in the gaps and extend the range of existing networks so that they can have better internet, so that they can have Wi-Fi calling across properties, and so that they can adopt ag tech and make use of smart machinery and the like.
What's the biggest challenge with trying to roll out that sort of connectivity?
There's a few. Obviously, the key one and the thing that we're trying to solve that others haven't really tackled in this space is how do you build a network that works when your budget is for an agricultural application, not for mining or infrastructure? Like if we're talking about how Rio Tinto do this, they can put out private LTE and it works incredibly well, but the budget's got to be there to make that work.
Yes.
To do it on a farm, you need to come up with a way of doing it at a cost that actually delivers a good return on investment. So that's the first challenge, and that's one we've solved using technology. The second challenge, and this actually ties into it, is who's going to do it? You need someone out on the ground there to physically install it, and using traditional vendors' equipment, which is my background, using Cisco or Ubiquiti or Meraki or pick a vendor. They all make great gear. But they make it for the enterprise sector and they make it for SMEs. They haven't really optimized it for use in the bush. And one of the key things there is that you need a network technician or engineer to deploy it and configure it and manage it. All of our gear has been built from the ground up to be remotely managed, remotely deployed, and we use smart hands in the form of local electricians. So we're employing local labor, people that can get out there quickly to get it deployed and, if necessary, get out there to maintain it. And that keeps the costs down because we're not having to fly in technicians to do it. And it means that we've built something that's really scalable because there's workforces right across the country, right across the world, maintaining the electrical side of things. And we can tap into that to deploy the data side as well. Australia has got the biggest problem in the world when it comes to connectivity due to just the nature of our continent. And that's driven the necessity of developing this technology. And it's not like we invented Wi-Fi, although one of our advisors did, Dave Scallon. Yeah. We're copying from and standing on the shoulders of the people who went before us. So the companies like Ubiquiti and Cisco that have built great gear has got us part of the way there. And then it's been the innovations we've seen from farmers. Like it was 3 years ago that I met a guy named Andrew Seville, a farmer from up near Dirranbandi, who had built his own 53-metre tower in order to get Wi-Fi across his property. And at the time I was teaching Cisco classes and one of the students brought this to my attention. I hunted down Andrew's phone number and gave him a call. And that's when I started to understand just how big this opportunity was and how much it was needed, because not every farmer is going to build a 50-metre tower, but there's plenty that will work with a company like Zetifi that can help them implement a farm-wide Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, that's excellent. Now, I guess that connectivity provides a great backbone for other things in the future. What other emerging technologies do you think will be using the Zetifi network going forward?
Like everyone, I've been excited by IoT for a long time. And even though we're like the Internet of Things, we're not directly working in that space, but we certainly enable it in two ways. And I think that's something that's really starting to hit its strides. Companies like FarmBot are putting products out there that are being widely adopted for monitoring water. And that's a farmer's most important resource, or maybe second most important after time. But it's certainly critical. And companies like FarmBot are doing a great job with low bandwidth sensors that get data into the cloud via various methods, say LoRaWAN via NNNCO's systems or a satellite over Myriota or others. And then that gets your data into the cloud. Where Zetify steps in is getting it back to your dashboard on your phone. And we sort of close that loop. So that's where I think that being able to close that loop and allowing farmers to actually have access to that data when they need it to make decisions has been the missing step. And I think that us coming into market at scale is really going to see the IoT side of things also picked up by more farmers. Another one is seeing some of the market leaders starting to embrace technology in a much bigger way. Companies like Gallagher and Shearwell, who make devices that all farmers have got on their farms, like electric fence energizers, and of course the EID, so the electronic ID for cattle and sheep ear tags. Those sorts of devices are starting to support Wi-Fi, and I think that's a critical step. Not all farmers are ready to jump out there and invest in brand new technology that they've never needed and think they don't need now. But EID has been legislated in some states and it's been widely adopted right across the industry. And many farmers are still scanning all of that into a laptop and then having to go back to the farmhouse and do their bookwork at night. And if they find they've made an error, they may have to go back the next day and scan them all again, which is less than ideal. With a connected device, which a lot of the newer models are fully connected via Wi-Fi, and a Zetifi Rover, our product that goes on the ute or on the tractor, it's possible for the farmer to be connected in real time. They can upload that data while they're down in the yards, and that can just save an enormous amount of time and reduce the risk of not collecting the information you need to get the job done right the first time.
Yeah, and these revisits out into the paddock can actually take hours, can't they? It's not just
exactly
5-minute walk down the road. So
that's right.
Yeah. Amazing. So that's really important. Obviously, what you're doing seems to be complementary to what's happening with the MNOs and neutral host providers as well, in terms of you're using MNO networks and neutral host networks to provide your backhaul. How's that working at the moment?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we're carrier agnostic as far as backhaul goes. We're all about, we will help customers get backhaul to their property, working with a wireless internet service provider or with a satellite provider, with NBN, of course. We work very closely with them. We also work with Telstra and Optus, and we've even connected some people to the low Earth orbit satellites via Starlink, which is quite exciting. Yes. Yeah, we're neutral with the backhaul. We're all about filling in the gaps and extending that range. And I do think that there's a massive opportunity there. It's working incredibly well already on farms. And I think there's a lot of potential for this model to work at a wider scale across communities. That's something that we're very passionate about, filling in the mobile black spots. And we've done some pilots with the support of Birchup Cropping Group to actually use farm infrastructure to fill in public roads. And the Birchup Cropping Group staff have got some of our rovers, which are typically put on top of tractors. They've got them on their utes, which is fine until you go through the Birchup bottle shop. And that's taken a few dents. Well, now we've snapped a few antennas, but we're working on that as well. But it does mean that they can now drive around the region and be connected both to Telstra and Optus via the bonded connection we've got on these devices. But the more exciting part is that we can, with a very low-cost Wi-Fi repeater, actually fill in the gaps in that mobile network, and they can have uninterrupted calls as long as they're driving in places where we've got farms that are connected. So by getting the farm connected, we provide a lot of benefits to the agricultural sector and to that individual farm and all the social benefits that come to their family. But I think what we've stumbled on is actually a model that can solve the mobile black spot problem on many public roads as well.
Yeah, that's really exciting because, as we both know, there's a lot of black spots on roads throughout Australia. It's a very big country, lots of roads, and not a lot of density on those roads. So,
exactly.
Yeah, huge black spot issue. So it's really a kind of a mixed private network for the farmer on his own farm or her own farm, and a public network in terms of that connectivity across the smart communities to try and, I guess, raise that smart community type environment for everyone. So you're joining the dots, I guess, between having no connectivity, being able to make phone calls, which is almost a obligation for everyone to be able to do that in a country like Australia, and then looking at how you can use the technology more widely to make things more efficient. So we talked a little bit about those tractors and making them more efficient, and looking at how some of the other devices can become more efficient as well. Is there any other areas that you think that the farmers and the communities could make efficiency gains, or that sort of thing, Dan?
Absolutely, definitely. Like farms are just another business. It just happens that a farmer can't just be a grower of things. They've also got to be a mechanic and a business person and an accountant and an engineer and everything else that they need to be to run their business.
Yep.
So there's a massive opportunity for improving efficiencies and profitability, and the whole sector's aiming for $100 billion of output by 2030, which is an increase from the 70 odd that we're at now. And Professor David Lamb from Food Agility this week stated that he thinks that might be underselling it. He thinks we might be able to see even more increases there, both through education and adoption of best practice and through technology and connectivity. So NBN estimates that improved connectivity would be a value to farms of about $16 billion of output a year.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a huge amount. And where does that come from? Well, really simple things for starters, being able to use Zoom, being able to use email when you're in the paddock rather than having to drive back to the house to make use of those tools so that you get more done in your day. From autonomous machinery, of course, we're on the cusp of seeing that. And I shouldn't say that. We are seeing it. There are production systems running out there from companies like Swarm Farm, the Swarm bots that are working. They're selling them and they're out there. We've got Zetifi devices on top of Swarm Farm robots that are providing the connectivity in remote areas so that the farmer can steer these things or just set them to work and leave them to it. But we are on the cusp of seeing that from the mass manufacturers. The Case IHs and the New Hollands and the John Deeres are very busy acquiring companies that can help them be the first to market with that and spending a lot of money in trying to be the first to do it. And it's very exciting to see the progress that they're making. Of course, connectivity has a part to play in that as well. So we're positioning ourselves to be a leader in that space. And I think that's going to be the one that really drives the market to make use of technology and connectivity.
Yeah, so Dan, we talked a little bit about smart communities and the connectivity that Setify's solution actually provides, not just to the farmers, but to the communities as well. What sort of benefits will the communities get, do you think, out of that enhanced connectivity?
So I think solving this connectivity or the digital divide or the digital inclusion, whatever you want to call it, in rural areas is it is not just an agricultural problem. It's really about the whole community. And it's not all about Zetifi by any stretch. There's so many other players in this space, and we're just one part of the solution and one company solving one part of that solution. I think the benefit of solving this problem really addresses a lot of the fundamental societal questions and challenges, things like education. Like look at what happened during COVID and then imagine for a second how that experience would have been 20 years ago had you not had mobile or broadband. Being able to have, I've got 3 kids and each day having 3 of them on Zoom at the same time. It's like, wow, this is actually pretty cool when you think about these packets are leaving my phone, my wife's phone, the computer over there, and they're all going out here into a classroom over here, and it's coming back, and you've got a 5-year-old sitting there turning pages on a book and reading to her classmates.
Yes.
Like 20 years ago, that would have been impossible. Unfortunately, on a lot of farms, that's still impossible. You can't do that with, at least with that many devices. They'd certainly struggle.
Basically goes to school of the air, doesn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, if you take the connectivity out of it and you're stuck using HF radio, then the experience is incredibly different.
Yes.
So yeah, that's education's one. Medical's the other area where there's, and telehealth, an emerging area where rural people have traditionally been significantly disadvantaged when it comes to health outcomes, and
yes.
that can be solved with connectivity because, or at least the damage can be largely mitigated with connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping people connected from a social point of view and giving people some downtime as well. Like everyone wants Netflix, and it's often put out there and people laugh if I talk about farmers wanting Netflix. And at first it seems like, oh, that's a joke. And so no, we're quite serious. Like farmers work incredibly hard, and at the end of the day, they deserve to go home and have some downtime. You need that. And most of us are making use of connected technology to make use of that downtime. So farms are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, whilst we are getting better connectivity at fixed locations, that mobile requirement is still there, isn't it? Because people do want to walk into their gardens, they want to go to the park and still be connected.
Exactly. And out on the roads, like the people that we're working with are often they're either the farmers who are on the on the farm needing to be connected, or they're driving into town. So they're taking these things that we bought to put on tractors and they're putting them on on the Prado. They look kind of funny once you get them on there. You look a bit like a fishing trawler because the three big antennas on it.
Yes.
See an example here. This is
Yep.
an early model, but the new one has three. So you stick that on top of a Prado, and it does look a little funny, but people don't care at the minute because they just want to stay connected. The passenger vehicle version of that's in the pipeline. But they need to be connected, and they need to be connected everywhere. Like my kids, I know when we're driving, desperately want to, why can't I play my Nintendo Switch? And it's like, well, you're not on the internet. What do you mean I'm not on the internet? They don't get it because we're in town. But if we can solve that problem, it's not just about keeping the kids' Nintendo working. It's like if you break down and you need to make a phone call, it's a safety issue as well. And both on farm and off farm, there's legitimate reasons to have connectivity everywhere for safety and for business productivity. Look at companies like Elders, Nutrien, Delta Ag, those three companies, and Auctions Plus as well. Those four companies will be trialling the 5G version of our rover under the 5G Innovation Initiative. So that's a project that we're running to demonstrate the potential of the 5G network. Yes. And we're putting devices on farms, but also in agricultural businesses that are traveling around areas where there's not much coverage. And we're going to see what can the 5G low band network, like we're not naive enough to think we're going to get them on millimeter wave or anything, but we're hoping that Telstra's 5G low band network will make a big difference to the level of connectivity in these areas and give better coverage as well.
Yeah, excellent. That's really good. And where do you think BAI can play a part in helping enable this agricultural business, the agricultural sector improving their efficiency and helping those communities become smarter through technology?
So as a leading provider and manager of infrastructure, I think BAI's definitely got a role to play in solving this problem through Australia, with your established presence, your towers, and your desire to become a neutral host provider. And that's something it's very new, this whole concept of having a neutral host provider in Australia. Mm-hmm. But I do think that it does make a lot of sense. We're going to have Telstra and Optus competing on macro cells and competing on coverage, and we need to maintain that competition, I believe. And I think the ACCC's position on that is fundamentally correct, that allowing carrier roaming would actually long term give us some disadvantages because it removes the need for competition. And I think if we want to see continued investment in macro cells, that the ACCC's position that carrier roaming should not be mandated is correct, even though that in the short term does mean there's a challenge there that people could have coverage on both networks if they had that carrier roaming. I think they're better off with having those guys investing to fill in the gaps where there's a need but not quite enough need for either of them to invest. I can see companies like BAI, like FSG, like Pivotel, the companies that are putting themselves out there as alternative providers for neutral host infrastructure have definitely got a role to play, and BAI is in a very strong position to take a lead on that, I think. And then I'm hoping as well that BAI and others will see that there's a need to take it that next tier down, which is, look, there's not enough population density to justify even a small cell, even if it was neutral host and everyone can access it. You're still talking about a couple of $100,000. Yes. It's probably not feasible to put in LTE here, but what we can do is tap into the one we put down the road and get it on some power poles. And if we, like right now, we're looking at a cost to do that of like $5,000 to $7,000, and that only gives you a few kilometres of line of sight coverage. But that's still pretty significant when it's 100 times cheaper than the next best alternative. And that's at a pretty small scale. We've only got 15 people here and we're building them here in Wagga. If we can increase our outputs and drive those costs down, it's not unrealistic to think that we could have tens of thousands of power poles lit up with Zetify's sleepy Wi-Fi. So we've got a patent pending on technology that allows us to put these things to sleep and then wake them up on demand over enough range that basically a car can be traveling, it wakes up, the car connects, the car goes past, it goes back to sleep, which means we can minimize the size of the solar panels and batteries to the point where it's a pretty small bit of kit. and it'll provide the coverage needed at a very low cost. So that's kind of the dream. That's what we're working towards.
So that was really interesting, Dan. And like I knew some of this stuff already, so it was really good to actually have a chat to you about it and learn a bit more from you as well. So it's been really enjoyable catching up with you and understanding a bit more about what you're trying to achieve through Zetify and how you're trying to enable smart communities in regional Australia.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it.